Welcome to the Man with No Name podcast. I'm your host, a man with no name. I'm no single man, yet every man. I'm you, exploring the highs and lows, the shared journey of fatherhood, marriage, and personal growth. Thanks for joining me. Episode 4, Compassion and Doing Good in the World. Welcome back to the Man with No Name podcast. Thank you. Thank you for all the messages, comments, and reviews of the podcast so far. Your messages, shares, and feedback have meant the world to me, and it's because of you that this podcast is continuing to grow. If you like what I've been doing here, please subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please like and follow on Instagram. If you have any messages or anything that you want to pass along, hit me up on social media or email me directly at themanwithnonamepodcast@gmail.com. Your support helps spread these important conversations even further. Today, we're diving into a topic that's not just personal to me, but something that I believe has the power to change the world. Compassion, doing good, and altruism. Be the change that you want to see in the world. You've heard this Gandhi quote before, but these words carry so much weight, especially when it comes to showing compassion. It's one thing to talk about being kind. It's another to actually take action to be that change. We live in a world where it's easy to sit idly by to assume someone else will step up when things need to change. But what if you were the person to step in, took action, and made a difference? Compassion isn't just about feeling empathy for someone in need. It's about doing something to help. And that's where real change begins. It starts with you, with me, with all of us taking those small steps that create a ripple effect. On today's podcast, we're going to talk about that ripple effect. How sometimes all it takes is one person to light the spark of positive change through compassion. That spark, that small act of service, can grow into something much, much larger. It can lead to a movement, to a greater shift in how people treat each other, and ultimately to a better world. As you listen, I want you to think about what kind of spark you can ignite in your own life. In today's episode, we'll explore my journey and what shaped me into someone who values helping others, and later on, we'll have a special guest, Dee Christman, who I have the privilege of calling a friend. Dee and her late husband, and my dear friend Bernard Yave, courageously fought Bernard's cancer diagnosis for 8 years. During those 8 years, there were some really high highs and really low lows, but a lot of good came out of it. Good that benefited the world. She'll share her story, how compassion was a spark that started this movement, and how compassion made an impact on her and her late husband's life, and why it's important that we all do what we can to help others. So let's get into why this is such an important subject to me, and why I personally oftentimes feel the call to do good where I can. There were several moments that shaped my understanding of compassion, but one memory stands out above the rest. It was a day I'll never forget, and at the time, I had no idea how profound it would be. I was walking through the streets of Philadelphia on an ordinary day when I stumbled upon something that stopped me in my tracks. I saw a line of people, thousands of people, 4 people wide, stretching around 2 entire city blocks. It wasn't a concert or an event that would normally draw such a crowd, so I naturally stopped and I asked someone in line, "What's this line for?" I'll never forget their answer. They turned to me and said, "It's for Fred DeBona's funeral." At that point, I knew nothing about Fred DeBona. But later on, I found out that he was the CEO of Independence Blue Cross, based out of Philadelphia. One by one, the people in line shared stories about Fred. They spoke about how during their darkest times, Fred was there to help. He didn't just assist a few. He helped countless people, quietly and selflessly, never asking for anything in return. He helped them find jobs, supported families in need, extended a hand whenever someone was struggling. Every person in that line had a story about how Fred's compassion touched their life. I was also struck by the fact that this man was a CEO of a major organization, someone who didn't need to be so giving. Yet the people telling his stories ranged from fellow executives to janitors in the building. This man cared indiscriminately, without regard for social status or title. Fred's compassion wasn't limited to those in his inner circle or people who could offer something in return. He extended his kindness to everyone, from high-ranking professionals to the everyday workers who crossed his path. It reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. A man's character can be measured by how he treats someone from which he has nothing to gain. This was Fred. I was completely blown away, not just by the sheer number of people, but by the way they spoke about him. It wasn't because he was a well-known figure. It was because of the kindness and generosity he showed behind the scenes. These people felt compelled to stand in line for hours, paying their respects to honor the legacy Fred left behind. I stood there, I couldn't help but reflect. What kind of legacy am I going to leave? How much good have I done? How much good will I do in my lifetime? Fred's life wasn't defined by his position or his accolades, but by the compassion he showed to others. It was the way he helped people without hesitation or expectation back. That moment lit a spark in me, and seeing the lasting impact Fred DeBona had on so many lives made me realize the power of compassion and how it transcends time and outlives us. I knew then that I wanted to dedicate myself to doing good in this world and leave a legacy of helping others just like Fred did. Compassion and service are like footprints. Long after we're gone, they remain. That day, I realized the only thing we truly leave behind is the legacy of how we made people feel. From that moment on, I carried a belief that it's our responsibility to help where we can, when we can. That sense of responsibility grew over the years, and it's been a driving force in my life, both in my personal relationships and in the broader sense of community. Let's talk about compassion as a core value. Compassion isn't just about feeling for someone, it's about action. It's about seeing someone in need and stepping in, even when it's inconvenient, even when you have nothing to gain. Compassion requires you to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to feel their pain, and then to act with empathy and kindness. True compassion is selfless. It's about doing good without expecting anything in return, simply because it's the right thing to do. Think about it. How often do we stop and truly connect with someone who's going through a tough time? In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in our own lives, our own problems, and we overlook the struggles of others. But compassion makes us pause, to look beyond ourselves, and to recognize that we're all connected. We all have moments of suffering, of hardship, and it's in those moments that compassion can be a lifeline, a bridge that helps us come together. Studies show that acts of compassion and service aren't just good for the person receiving the help. They actually help benefit the giver. Helping others can alleviate your own stress and anxiety, create a sense of purpose, and even improve your overall well-being. It's like a cycle of positivity. When you perform an act of kindness, your brain releases chemicals like oxytocin, which not only makes you feel good, but also strengthens social bonds and builds trust. And what's even more powerful is the fact that it's contagious. One small act of compassion can inspire others to do the same. I've seen it. It creates a ripple effect. And this ripple effect is something we often underestimate. It's like dropping a stone in a pond. The initial impact might seem small, but the ripples extend far beyond what we can see. A single act of compassion might brighten someone's day, but it could also change their perspective, lift their spirits, or even inspire them to help someone else. It could change the trajectory of their life. And that's how movements begin. Compassion has the power to spread, to grow, and to create change on a much larger scale. If you're listening today and wondering how you can start incorporating more compassion into your life, start small. Compassion doesn't always mean making grand gestures or donating large sums of money. It can be as simple as holding the door for someone, offering a smile to someone who seems down, or taking a moment to check in with a friend or colleague who's struggling. These small, everyday actions can lead to big changes. I remember reading a story once about a man who just made it a point to smile and say hi to everyone that he passed on the street. One day he found out that his small gestures actually saved someone's life, someone who was planning to take their own life, until that simple act, that simple acknowledgement made them feel seen. It's a powerful reminder that we don't always know the impact we're having on others. A kind word or a small gesture can make all the difference. And the beauty of compassion is that it doesn't take much effort, but the rewards are immense, both for the person receiving it and for you. When we think of compassion as a core value, we realize that it's something that we can practice every day. Whether it's at home, at work, or in our communities, we can all make the decision to be more compassionate. It doesn't require us to be perfect or to solve all the world's problems. It just requires us to show up with an open heart, to be willing to listen, and to take action when we see someone else in need. And it's something we can practice every day. I'm definitely one that can use that practice. And over time, these small acts of compassion add up. They create a more connected, caring world. So I challenge you to reflect on how you can make compassion a bigger part of your life. Think about the people around you, the small ways you can show up for them, and how that might create a ripple effect of positivity. I'm not saying be Mother Teresa here. I'm not making it all rainbows and unicorns, but start small. The more we practice compassion, the more natural it becomes. And before you know it, you'll find yourself seeking out opportunities to help others. Not because you have to, but because you want to. And that's where the real, lasting change begins. I want to share a few stories with you now, moments in my life where I've stepped in to help in meaningful ways. One of the people I was fortunate enough to support was Dee, and we'll be talking to her later on in this episode. But there have also been many moments where I've helped strangers, people I didn't know. Now, before I proceed, I want to make something clear. I'm not here to boast about the ways I've helped others. The reason I stay anonymous in this podcast is so I can share these stories freely without it ever being about recognition or the limelight or taking credit. It's about the bigger picture. Compassion and service ripple far beyond us. These thoughts are not only for you, the listener, but also for my kids. I want them to hear about how I think about the world and understand that doing good isn't just about praise. It's about creating a better world. I hope they're inspired to carry that torch forward in their own lives. When I owned a gym, I took pride in helping people, not just with fitness, but with life. I saw so many members of the community struggling, not only physically, but emotionally and financially. Sometimes they couldn't afford their memberships, so I'd comp them or give them a free membership. For many, it wasn't about access to the gym. It was about finding a place where they felt supported. Was this good business sense? No, absolutely not. Letting people work out for free when I was a for-profit business, definitely not good business. But I didn't care. The way that I saw it was that I wasn't going to receive their money anyway, so why not have a net benefit come out of this? Why not make a bad situation good and pass on some positive karma? Offering that space wasn't simply just about helping them stay active. It was about giving them the chance to rebuild, to feel a part of something bigger, and to know that someone genuinely cared about their journey. I'd often remind my staff that we weren't just in the gym business, we were in the relationship business. People walk through those doors for all kinds of reasons. The fitness was just the surface. Some people were healing from trauma or loss, and in certain cases, people were even preparing for their own passing. What they needed more than anything was connection and compassion. I was always looking for opportunities to help, even outside of the gym. One time, I was waiting for a haircut at a barbershop, and the guy before me got his cut, then claimed that he didn't have money on him and said he'd go to the ATM just a few units down. I watched him as he walked out, and he passed right by the ATM, clearly with zero intention of coming back. The woman who cut his hair looked visibly upset, knowing that she just lost out on her hard-earned money. So I decided to pay for his haircut. It didn't make what he did right, but it erased some of the distress that I saw in her and hopefully brought a little good into the world. Most recently, there was an Amazon delivery woman whose car broke down while she was delivering packages to the house next door. She was stranded and stressed. I tried everything to fix her car, jumping it, checking it for problems, but nothing worked. It was dead. She called her boyfriend for help, and he was about 150 miles away and couldn't arrive for at least 3 to 4 hours. I looked at the situation, saw my kids outside, saw my family outside watching this, and knowing that it was close to my kids' bedtime. Usually at that time, I would help put them to bed, but I couldn't just leave her there. So I told her to load the rest of her packages into my truck. For the next 3 hours, I helped her deliver them, making sure she didn't get in trouble or risk losing her job, and then I drove her home. Her boyfriend didn't even make it until 5 hours later due to traffic. I wanted my kids to see this as an example of what compassion looks like in action. Being the good in the world, even when it's inconvenient. Those are just some examples of where I've tried to do some good, where I've tried to think outside of the box. We're going to get into Dee and Bernard's story next when she joins us, but I want to say this. The work we do for others, whether it's emotional support, financial help, or just lending a listening ear, ripples out into the world. And as much as I've helped others, I can honestly say they've helped me just as much. These acts of service aren't just for the benefit of others, they're a path towards our own growth. So if you're listening right now and feel that urge to help someone, or even if you're unsure whether you have something to offer, trust me, you do. Compassion is the muscle that grows stronger the more you use it. And we'll dig deeper into this idea when Dee shares her story. And now, the interview with Dee Christman. Her story, and Bernard's, is one of resilience, of hope, and the power of compassion. And with that said, here's the interview. So I'm here with Dee Christman. We can use your name. We're talking about really compassion, the effects of compassion, and your story with Bernard, how it all started, how we kind of met, or we already met at that point, but how we started working together, the rest of the story from there. I'll let you start off by sort of introducing yourself. Okay. Just for people that are listening that don't know who you are, who are you?
Well, I'm Dee Christman. I was a truck driver for many, many years, kind of odd profession for a small little woman. But through my profession, I met what became my future husband, Bernard. And we started running together and just having a good time together. And then we started going to a gym together. and we met you and all of the other members of that gym, which were stellar people in their own rights. Bernard and I were really enjoying our time there, and we as a group of our, some of our members had decided to run Nike Women's Marathon together. And Bernard and I were training for it. We were doing a lot of off-road racing type of, obstacle course racing and everything. And I was 12 years older than Bernard, and Bernard started to fall behind, which was pretty weird because I shouldn't have been able to beat him, but I was. And so he just kept saying he was in a fitness funk. And then he started having fevers, and he had a tooth infection, and finally talked him into going and getting the tooth pulled, but the fevers and the infection continued. He went and had a blood test done on a Wednesday, and they called us on a Saturday morning and said, you have to go to the hospital right now. And we checked into the hospital, Zion, down in Kaiser Zion, and we didn't come out for 30 days. He was diagnosed with leukemia, and they had to immediately start chemotherapy. That was our first experience of what a bone marrow biopsy was, which is basically like somebody taking a wine corkscrew to your hip and grinding it in and pulling out a core. And it was pretty scary and uncomfortable. And, then we got the notice that he had AML, which is an acute form of leukemia. And his only options at that point in time were a bone marrow transplant.
And this was in 2012?
12, correct.
2012.
Yeah, August of 2012.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so, it's like life came crashing down. We were on top of the world doing all the things we wanted to do, and then all of a sudden, it was full stop. I remember being at the hospital with him, and then I had to go back to work and telling him not to look on the internet, because everybody I'd talked to said, don't let him surf the internet, because it's the worst thing. And sure enough, he did. And at the time, there was a guy's, it wasn't a podcast, but it was a blog, and he had been journaling his journey through AML, which didn't end well. And I got back to the hospital that night, and he was looking at me, and he held out the computer to me, and I'm like, what did I say? Don't do this. Mm-hmm. But, it was a wake-up call for both of us about how truly serious what he was going through was. I called you, was one of the first people I ever called. I also had to call his parents. I had never spoken to his parents before, ever. I'd never met them. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that. That's an introduction.
I had never met them before. And so he didn't want to call them. He wanted me to call them. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know them. And you want me to tell them that you have leukemia? That was an interesting Filipino white person interaction. It's really the only way I can explain it.
By the way, we're dating.
By the way, I'm 12 years older than your son, and I'm dating him. And by the way, he also has leukemia. So that was, we made jokes about that for a long time afterwards. And his parents were very accepting of me because they soon realized that my whole goal in life was to make sure Bernard was healthy.
Tell me more about the mindset. Like when you were first diagnosed with you and Bernard, what was your mindset?
My mindset was immediately fight. It was that's just my personality. I'm going to fight. I'm going to work my ass off to make sure something happens if I can make it happen. He, for the first time, was probably the weaker of the two of us. He was really struggling with it. I was trying to tell him, this is going to be a marathon, not a 5K, just using our running, jargon to try to spur him into something. And he just was, he was sad and he was scared and, all of the things that you would be if you got that diagnosis. And I was trying to find a way to help him through it. And I believe that first weekend, or maybe the second weekend I think it was the second weekend we were in the hospital, we were having a competition at the gym, at one of the gyms nearby. And all of the athletes put bees on their body or on their shirts, or do you remember that?
That's right. At Mission Gorge before.
At Mission Gorge, yeah.
Yeah.
And even the head honcho guy was there.
Yeah.
And he wore a headband with a bee on it. And
I remember that.
That was kind of like, I think, our first introduction to the fact that people cared about what was happening to us. They had compassion for what we were doing, and they were trying to lend him strength through their actions.
Thinking back, at the time, what was the prognosis? The doctor said 50-50 at the time, right?
At the time, they only gave him a 25% chance of living beyond a year.
Okay.
So that was why the bone marrow transplant was the only option of what we could do.
Wow. I didn't even know it was that bad. I remember it being 50-50, but we didn't tell Bernard.
No, we didn't tell Bernard.
Yeah.
It was a 25% chance of him living beyond a year. I didn't tell him that till much, much later because I didn't want that to be lodged in his head.
Yeah. What did he think the prognosis was?
I think something that I learned about Bernard over time is that Bernard kind of only heard what he wanted to hear to a certain degree, and he left the details to me, like literally. I was at every appointment with him. I lived in the hospital with him, and he just kind of quickly slid into the mindset of I'm gonna just keep my head down and move forward, and Dee's gonna take care of all of the details. And that's the way it worked for our relationship pretty much always, till from that point on.
Yeah.
And
I remember that too.
yeah. And so, I guided the ship and he, just stayed at the helm and looked straight forward. So he didn't really ask that many questions. I would just tell him what we needed to do, or the doctor. We didn't care for our first oncologist very much, but he was very well educated, and I did my research on him, and we kept him, but he got a schooling from me about learning to talk to Bernard and me better. He didn't have a good bedside manner.
Right.
And we were lucky that one of the head nurses there was a good friend, and she basically told him the same thing. So it got better. But, not everybody owns that kind of compassion. Not everybody owns that kind of bedside manner. And after years of working with him, he actually, after Bernard died, sorry to jump forward to ruin the end, but after Bernard died, that doctor actually called me and told me, he said, I just want you to know how sorry I am. But he said, I also want you to know that he would never have lived as long as he did had you not been with him. Mm-hmm. Which for me was, bittersweet.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, it is bittersweet, right? Because 25% chance of living 1 year versus 8
years.
8 years.
He lived 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years. It's way
and we
better.
we had some rough times, and we had lots of really good times.
So looking at where we're at now in this timeline, Bernard had just gotten diagnosed. You're trying to hold things together. That weekend of the competition, Bernard saw a bunch of people come together and in support of him.
Yes.
Just with the face paint, the armbands,
all the pictures, all the videos. He felt that. He felt that energy and that compassion and that, the well wishes of all of these people. He would bring that kind of as energy into himself.
Do you recall how you felt seeing that?
Oh, the same. It was just, because I left the hospital and went down to the competition and was able to see all of this. And yeah, I was able to take it in to myself also, so that I didn't feel the full burden of everything on just myself. At the time it was there, the burden did lie on me, but that group of people was, helped to disseminate some of it. I felt held up by a group as opposed to being by myself.
I can tell you from our perspective, when we first heard that one of our own was sick, because it did feel like he was one of our own, we felt helpless and we didn't know what to do. You see this often.
It's very true. I've seen it happen over and over and over. And my advice is always, my advice to either the spouse or the patient is to learn to ask for help. People want to help, but you have to give them a job. You have to give them something specific, because people say, well, let me know what you want. Well, when you're in the middle of it, it's difficult to say, well, can you bring us dinners, or can you do this? Sometimes it's easier, like I did with you, to turn it over to you, somebody that I knew was capable, somebody that I knew really wanted to help, and you were able to help guide some of the. I didn't have the bandwidth to manage everything myself, and you helped manage it. You helped me, find a way of doing stuff.
I think that's very insightful to hear that, because this is helpful, almost a Monday morning quarterback, right? Yeah. And look back at the two different sides, because from our perspective, we had a sense of helplessness, where we were sitting here going, we want to help. We don't know what to do. Are we going to infringe? What can we do? And I remember that when you and I talked, and I went back to the group and I said, all right, green light, let's go, and here's what we're doing, everybody felt almost a sense of relief.
Yeah.
Where not only were we helping Bernard and you, but it gave us almost a sense of relieving pressure. It was a pressure valve release where, okay, now we can do something and get some action going, because I think activity and action always helps.
Oh, it does. It 100% does. I mean, I think probably one of the hardest things about the whole journey that we went through was all the amount of time I lived in the hospital with him, because I had nothing that I could do. You know what I mean? I mean, other than being there with him and keeping him comfortable and helping him bathe and, you know, doing all of those things, I was, you know, and I was so used to being constantly in motion and always doing something and always completing things. I was a task-oriented person. And it was very difficult to just sit. And I will tell you that that's been a dramatic change in my personality, that 8 years of you know, I mean, we would spend 30 days, 60 days at a time in the hospital, and I would live in the hospital, not even going home. I mean, I showered in a gym. You know, I used laundry facilities wherever I could find them. I had to go get my food from outside. I mean, you know, because I couldn't use anything in his room.
You're bringing me back down memory lane. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, you would let me shower at your house.
Yeah.
You gave me a key to your house, and I could go by there and shower on my way to work. And
I forgot about that.
Lexi would give me love.
Yeah.
And allow me to cry. And that was the only time I cried. I never cried in front of Bernard. I never cried in front of other people.
Lenny.
But
I
Lenny,
remember that.
your dog, that dog,
right.
She would lean against me and love me. And she gave me the ability to get rid of that emotion and then get up and be strong again.
I remember that.
Very true. And then members of the gym made food for me, you know, because I wasn't going home at all. I was living at the hospital. And yeah, everybody fed me. You let me bathe. And yeah, I mean, that was a big help to us at the time. We didn't know anybody else. You know, my dad died from leukemia, but my dad was very old. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we always thought of it as an old person's disease. And Bernard's diagnosis at his age was really rare with that type of leukemia because it was a very aggressive one.
I remember seeing him in the hospital and the staggering difference in appearance. You know, here he was lifting weights literally one day, and then the next day he was bald, skinny.
Yeah.
And I still remember that picture I took with him with the mask, before masks were a thing.
Yeah, before masks were something you had to do, yeah.
But yeah, I remember that. And I also remember getting a sense that from Bernard that there was an acknowledgement that what we were doing together for him and with him was helping.
Yes.
Just with his demeanor. And I think that when you have your mental state in a certain way where you're mentally ready for recovery and to fight, your body fights and follows. Do you think you saw that in Bernard?
Oh, I saw it very much in Bernard. So to kind of jump forward, we had a month to get him ready for bone marrow transplant. We were lucky that his sister was a match because it's very difficult to find ethnic matches on the bone marrow registry. And so we only had a month because they didn't want to have to do another bone marrow biopsy. Because if he fell out of remission, they wouldn't be able to do the transplant. So, you know, luckily kept him in remission and got to City of Hope and did the transplant up there. And, you know, that was basically they give you enough full body radiation and chemotherapy to basically come as close to killing you as possible. Mm-hmm. And then they try to save your life by giving you, you know, the new marrow. And then it's your body's job to try to assimilate it and build a new immune system. And it's very, very kind of science fiction-ish. But it was really hard to watch. I mean, there were multiple times when, you know, like after the transplant, he went through what's called rigors, which is just basically his body went into spasm, just into full clinched. I mean, he would just start to shake so hard, and anyways, you know, like you couldn't leave the room because it's a lockdown room. So there's 2 doors to get in and out of it. So to get out to get a nurse, you basically just have to bang on the window and scream. And then, you know, they'd come to the window and you'd tell them what was going on, and then they try to get inside as quick as they could to give him a shot. And there were several times during that time period where I thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
And he left When he got diagnosed, he weighed 161 pounds. When he left the hospital at the transplant center, he weighed 119.
Yeah.
And he looked like he had come out of Ethiopia. He was dark from all the radiation. He was so skinny, just kind of skeletal.
What was the time period on that?
So he was diagnosed on August 12th, and he had his transplant on October 11th. 10th, I take it back.
40 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when he came home, like you're talking about, like his attitude, his mental attitude, I had to go back to work. And so I had to make sure he had food for everything because he couldn't have no takeout food. He couldn't have anything that was heated in a microwave. Everything had to be made fresh. And so that was, a chore. But anyways, so I would leave in the morning and I'd say, okay, Dr. Farrell said, his doctor said, you could start walking and doing stuff. And then I would come home at night and he'd be like in the same exact place I left him, wearing his pajamas still. And I'm like, what did you do today? Oh, well, I go, you didn't move all day long, did you? And I would get aggravated with him. Well, we had a neighbor who was like 89 years old. And every day she'd walk down to the market down the way and back. And it was like a 2-mile round trip walk. She'd go down there and get her lottery tickets. And so I came home one day and I got really aggravated with him. And I said, you know what? If Jane can walk that far, you should be able to walk that far. And it was kind of like I threw a challenge down to him, So the next day he got up and he started walking with Jane. And he couldn't make it the mile. He could only go a little ways and then he'd have to come back and lay back down. But that started the mindset, and then in addition, remember he had to go back to City of Hope 2 times a week during that time period for, 60 days or something. Well, that's 250-mile round trip. He couldn't make it. So you set up, a schedule and people would sign up to drive him.
I remember that. Yeah.
And those drives helped him because he was sharing that time with somebody other than me, because at that point he was sick of my face, know. But it gave him the opportunity to talk to other people and for them to lend him their strength also and their will wishes and their feelings about him. And that was an important part of that whole journey.
It's wild thinking back to these stories because I've forgotten a lot about this and thinking back about people taking that 2-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive.
Well, basically it would be a 4-hour round trip.
Yeah, 4-hour round trip just to help him.
Yeah.
It really restores a lot of faith in humanity.
It did. It did for us too. I mean, it was very momentous to feel that amount of love from other people that although you knew them, you didn't know them very well.
Right.
And they didn't have to do what they were doing, but they did it out of love.
Let's sort of jump forward just a little bit.
Okay.
When did he go into remission? When did b.strong? And if you could go into b.strong,
sure.
How did it get formed? Why did it get formed? What was it for?
So I had said we were signed up to do the Nike Women's Marathon, and it was a group of us from our gym. When obviously we knew Bernard was not going to be able to go, and neither was I, everybody wanted to do something specific to try to show support. So it kind of came up with the bees on everybody's bodies and headbands during the competition. That, it was like, okay, because his name started with a B also. It was like be loved, be strong, be, a lot of different things, but we settled on be strong because that just seemed to be appropriate, for where we were. We had T-shirts made that everybody that was going to go run the race in San Francisco, after they got done, they were all going to, put their T-shirts on. I ran the race around City of Hope. Try doing 26 miles, 1 mile at a time.
Yeah.
And then I had a bus driver take a picture of my watch and then because I sent it to Nike Women's because I wanted them to know I actually did it, and then went inside and put Bernard's shirt on him and put my shirt on him, and we all took pictures, posted them to social media, and then everybody wanted the shirt. Mm-hmm. And that's how b.strong really got started, was that people wanted to buy the shirt. And so we kind of saw that we had a platform to educate people about leukemia and to find a way to do something positive. And that's pretty much how it started. And then when he recovered from that first transplant, we went to the leukemia lymphoma office to visit and just, get some information and stuff, and walked out of there. I was signed up to do a marathon with them, and he was the honored hero. I'm like, wait a second, how come I'm the one that always has to do the running?
Yeah.
But, and then we started Team b.strong. And I mean, since we started with Leukemia Lymphoma Society in 2013, I think I did my first race, to now, 2024, we've raised almost $2.5 million.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we're still going. We're still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Every year.
Yep.
There's that fundraiser, right? In his
Well,
honor.
and I mean, our team fundraised this year over $100,000, almost $200,000, just by having teammates signed up to do races, and it rolls up underneath our team. And so we're lucky enough so every $100,000 you raise, you can direct a research grant. You can decide what it's going to go to. Mm-hmm. And we were able to. We have a friend on our team that her husband died from leukemia also quite a while ago, and she's tried to make this $100,000 and never could quite get there. So we dedicated our season to her this year and her husband, and we're able to get a research grant in her husband's name. That's the kind of things that we're still trying to do, because we see, I mean, I may have lost my husband, just like Denise lost her husband, but we see so many people around us that are still suffering and going through stuff. And if we can make a difference, if we can stop, if we can help prevent other people from getting leukemia or find better drugs, better therapies for people, then that's the goal, because I don't want anybody to have to go through what we went through.
Right.
You
right.
know?
It's just staggering to hear, thinking back to that moment where he's laying in bed with that mask on at 120 pounds, and then hearing $2 million raised.
Yeah.
It's quite a turnaround.
So when I train people, and, I've been a coach for Team in Training, which is part of LLS, a few times. And when I have to try to help people learn how to fundraise, I mean, I'd never fundraised in my life. I mean, That was the hardest thing I ever thought I could do. And what I finally realized, and what I told everybody that I worked with, is it's an ask. All they can do is say no. You haven't lost anything. It's not taking anything from you, but if you ask, you will be surprised at how many people will give. Mm-hmm. I think that's been a really good lesson. It's made me more open to other people's struggles. We have a family from our gym that their son was born with diabetes. Mm-hmm. And, Bernard did a lot of back and forth talking with them and everything. And, and so maybe diabetes isn't my disease, mm-hmm. But it is affecting people, and it affects children, it affects old people, it affects all kinds of people. So, I have compassion for that too. And I'm going to give whatever I can and try to help, with that.
It's awesome to hear, right? Because your quote unquote area of expertise is leukemia, and now we're talking about taking those transferable skills and experiences and helping others, even outside of leukemia, with type 1 diabetes, right? Yeah. And it's just the momentum, the inertia is still going. Yeah. And I think Bernard would be proud. He is proud.
I think he would
of
be
everything
proud.
Going on.
Yeah, I think he would be very proud. I just really think that when people are handed a bad situation, there's kind of two alternatives. Either you take it and do something good with it, or you let it defeat you. And our choice was to take it and do something good with it. And I believe we have been very successful at that. And I believe that I only got 8 years with him, but it was better than that 1 year, of him being ill.
Better than the 1 year sentence that he received.
Yeah, and everybody, when he relapsed, and we knew we were going to have to go to a second transplant, everybody thought I was crazy for deciding to marry him right then. But it was the best choice I ever made in my life.
Absolutely.
I never thought that being married would change our relationship, could make it better, but it did. And and to me that was optimism. That was me saying, screw you, fate. We're gonna make our own fate. And we did the best we could, and we had a really good time doing it.
Being there for that wedding was one of the greatest moments of my life. It was such a special honor. It really was.
Well, you were the only one there.
Yeah. It meant a lot.
But that's an example of looking at things in a positive way. We got married that day with you there, and then that night we went to the competition at the gym. you had filmed our wedding, which we didn't know you were doing it. And we were at the competition. We got a phone call from one of our teammates through Team in Training that he had, because of Bernard, he had been tested to see whether he could be a bone marrow match for anybody. And he got the phone call that day that he was the match for a child that had leukemia. And he had agreed to donate.
Yeah.
So we got married. We got that phone call from Tommy. We went to the competition. You posted the video. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, who's going to see it at 10 o'clock on a Friday night? Well, all of our Team in Training teammates saw it.
Yeah.
And then went, like, because I had a 10-mile run to do the next morning with them. And we showed up at Team in Train the next morning. They had it decorated as a wedding.
That's right.
They had a veil. They had a wedding cake.
I remember that.
They had balloons. They had
that.
champagne. Yeah. And it was like, we laughed about it afterwards. It's like, you know what? I don't think we could have spent $100,000 on a wedding and had it been better. I mean, I got a wedding with you there, and then we got the wedding with Team in Training, and it was, we were flying high.
I want to talk more about Team in Training
Okay.
and what they've done. Before that, I want to kind of talk about, tell me what was the impetus? What was the drive to make that switch to go from, not that you ever had a victim mentality, but to sit there and go, what now, to saying, as you said, to making the second choice. Either you die from it or you do something with it.
We were in the hospital, sitting there I was laying in the bed with him, and we were talking about it, and he said, he goes, I don't want this to be the only thing that people see about who I am now. He said, I want them to see a positive, not a feel sorry for me. And so we made the conscious decision at that time that Bernard would be the face. He would be the one that would, because a lot of people after they have cancer, they don't want to ever talk about it again. And they just kind of put it away on a shelf and pretend like it didn't happen. And he decided, he goes, if I only live a year or if I live 5 years, he goes, I want to live every moment of it in a happy place. And I want to be able to try to, and we never thought that the fundraising that we were going to do would ever change the outcome for him. But in reality, a lot of what we did funded new research, and those things actually came to fruition during the time that Bernard was sick. And so he did benefit from fundraising, which goes towards research. And one of the clinical trials that he went through didn't exist when he went through his transplants, and it did exist for him later on, and it gave him extra time.
It also gave him a sense of purpose.
Yes, and the joke that he always made, which he always had jokes about everything, but the joke that he would make is that he said, well, I may not go to the moon, but I can be a science pioneer. So that was his attitude. It's like, bring on the clinical trials. I'll be a science pioneer.
Yeah.
And that's the way he felt about it.
In your perspective, from what you saw, do you think him having that sense of purpose kept him alive?
Yeah, I do. I truly believe that Bernard was always a good person, but never, he wasn't like, he didn't worry about other people necessarily. He was kind of a self-contained person. And after being diagnosed, that's what he always thought about. He always thought about everybody else. And I didn't find this out until after he passed, and I got into his phone with your help and started looking at stuff. Even when he was in the hospital and sick, he would be texting other people, hey, I know you had this going on, how did that turn out? Keep your chin up. Texting the parents of the boy, that was diagnosed with diabetes, it's like, I know this is hard for you, but you can do it. And he just was a cheerleader for everybody else, and never really shined a spotlight on himself.
That was our job.
Yeah, he became more comfortable with being, like the front of things, being the face, and said, his attitude was, if I can somehow make a difference in somebody else's life, then that's why I'm here. That's my purpose.
I think that applies to a lot of us. That's the purpose that a lot of us have and look for, right? To be able to help others.
Whether it's just your family or whether you decide to, create a nonprofit and try to, help animals or help homeless, the homeless, or feed people, or whatever it is that people want to put their energy in, I will tell you for a fact, it gives you back more than you'll ever give out. It comes back to you in just waves.
It really does.
It really does. I mean, I like I said, I don't believe I was a bad person before Bernard was diagnosed, but we were kind of self-oriented, and that's not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but I believe we came out of this as better people than we went into it because of compassion, because all of a sudden, yeah, you had something really crappy happen to you, but now you're looking outside of yourself going, how many more people are going through stuff that they have no control over? And we definitely came out of it as better people.
I have a couple of other questions. I want you to go into the story about the phone for the people that do know you, and how did you get into the phone? Because I think that's such a cool story.
Okay, so when he was sick, he knew all my passwords because I'm just like an open book. But he was always a very private person, so I didn't know his passwords and how to get in his phone and stuff. And we would talk about it sometimes, and then when things were going good, it felt like bad karma for him to share it with me. And then when things were going bad, it felt like even worse karma for him because we felt like, in a way, we were saying it was going to be over, So he never gave me his passcode. I didn't care about anything else on the phone except the pictures, because he took pictures of everything. I had knee surgery. I had tried everything to get that phone open. I took it to the Apple people. I took it to the Fix-It people. Nobody could open it. Gone to sleep, and I dreamed about him a lot back then, a really lot. And
he visits you.
Oh, he visited. Well, he just visited me recently, actually, just a few days ago. It was pretty cool. He came to me that night in a dream, and I got up in the morning, and I was like, kind of groggy, and I was like, I remembered that he had come to see me, and so I went downstairs and got on my spin cycle to do my PT for my knee, and I'm sitting on the spin cycle, and all of a sudden, it's just like this big whoosh goes through me. And I can hear his voice telling me, but you know the passcode to the phone. I'm like, no, I don't. He goes, but yes, you do. And he repeated the passcode. And I'm clipped into the bike. And I'm like trying to get off the bike so I can run upstairs because this phone was plugged in, bandaged knee and everything. And I'm just like, the dogs are barking. And I go climbing upstairs and I grab the phone. And sure enough, I punch in the numbers, which are just random numbers. They're not, there was 3 1s and 5s. And sure enough, it worked.
It worked.
And it opened his phone, and I literally laid down on the floor and cried. And then that's when I called you and said, okay, come help me.
I remember that. And at that point, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Because you told me the time you went hiking and the song that played.
Yep.
And even my son, do you remember that?
Yep.
When he was less than 2, he could barely talk.
And he was playing in the corner.
Playing in the corner. And he just started saying, is that Bernard? And I just said, what?
Yeah, and you said, who were you saying? And he goes, Bernard, Dad. Bernard's here.
Yeah.
And you were like, oh my God.
Yeah. 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 And looking back, the things that I believe now, the things that I've seen now, it's like, I have no doubt that he was around. He still is around.
Yeah.
So tell me more. You're talking about the running. Is this team in training?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about how they've affected you.
So you guys were there with us, for the first transplant. You helped us through so much. And then we became very deeply involved in team and training. And when he was diagnosed the second time, which was 3 years later, they kind of became our second family, after the gym family. And they knew, because a lot of these people had dealt with, the illness. And so it's like they knew what we needed. So they provided meals, they did all the driving. There were times when, because we were in the hospital at City of Hope for a long time, and that's a long ways from home. And somebody would go up every once in a while and stay with him at night so that I could come home for a night. It became a family, truly, truly a family, and with people who understood what we were going through. And, we met a few different people like that over time, but the team and training, and it gave us a purpose. It gave me a definitive purpose. I think I ran when we were in both stays up at City of Hope. Obviously I ran a marathon the first time, but I ran every day. That was my release. And I would talk on the phone, to some of my teammates, and it's like it was an ability for me to unload without it affecting Bernard. We have done some amazing fundraising with that group of people. It's been amazing. We did a few different marathons and we raised quite a bit of money on those. And then after he came back from that second transplant, everybody was like, we got to do something really big this time. And one of our other teammates was like, oh, you guys should do a triathlon. We all looked at each other like, well, I don't know how to swim. Somebody else says, I don't know how to ride a bike. I'm like, good, sounds perfect. It's like we said we wanted it to be hard,
Yeah.
And so we signed up for Lava Man in Hawaii. And, we fundraised for it. And we went in there as like the second team. We walked out of there as top fundraisers. I think we fundraised $340,000 for that one race.
Wow.
And then we turned around and did another race like 3 months later and walked away. Actually, yeah, we did Tahoe, America's Most Beautiful Bike Ride. And we walked in there as like the third team in the nation and left there as top team. We raised like I think $40,000 or $50,000 just while we were there that weekend. Yeah. And it was fun. It was energizing. It was, and it like Bernard just, he loved, actually Bernard did that race. Bernard was, because that was in 2018, I think. And Bernard had relapsed again and he was in treatment. And so he did chemo on Wednesday and rode 100 miles around Lake Tahoe on the weekend. And it was, and we had another teammate that was undergoing cancer treatment also. And, they led the 60 people through to the finish line. And it was like one of the most touching. I cried the whole way through the finish line. It was a pretty amazing thing. And through their support, they also helped us with clinical trials. It is a legitimate big group, a society, and they have all kinds of people that'll help you. They have people that all they do is look for clinical trials that'll suit your needs. They help you with gas, with just anything that they can help people. Bernard and I were financially okay, but we know people that couldn't. I don't know how they could get through what they're going through. They have no support. They had no family. We met a lot of them, and a lot of the ones that we met are no longer here. So I feel blessed that we got the time together that we got.
I just keep thinking back to the amount of impact that's come out of that decision, the decision that you and Bernard made.
And it was honestly a decision. It's like I think sometimes people slide into something not really consciously thinking about what impact them or how they're going to feel about it. It was a very conscious decision for Bernard and I to say, okay, we're going to go with this and
make something out of it.
And Bernard was willing to be the person that, stood up there and let everybody examine him,
Millions of dollars raised.
Yeah.
Multiple charities. A legacy that is still going on today.
Yeah.
Many, many people that have been helped since.
Yeah.
New careers. I think about people learning how to fundraise, right? Mr. Leon Cristobal, who is now
a director for LLS.
Director of LLS.
Which was actually a Playboy bunny at one of our gym workouts.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Boy, did he grow up.
Well, that's debatable. Leon's probably listening to this at some point, but that's debatable. But we love him, and he's grown so much.
And it was really all inspired by Bernard.
Yeah.
And I think Bernard's had that effect on a lot of people. He's had that effect on people that we've met, throughout our journeys. We did everything that LLS offered. We did Light the Night, team in training, Man Woman of the Year, you name it, we participated in it. And he would meet people at different events, and they would be inspired by how he embraced it all, and how happy he was.
So the ripple effect keeps going. What would you tell people that are listening that want to do some good or do something with their compassion? How do you get started?
You can start small. If you want to fundraise for something, there's not a charity out there that doesn't need people to fundraise for them. And what I would want people, like, we have dramatic success stories. We raised, a lot of money. But I also have a really close friend who is a very kind of in the background kind of person, but she loves dogs, and she has a grandson who is, he's got, mental development issues. And so she fundraises for challenged athletes, and she fundraises for canine companions because her grandson has benefited from a canine companion. She doesn't raise a bunch of money, but like I told her the same thing that I would tell, anybody else. It's like, just ask. It's just an ask. Nobody owes you anything. If they don't donate, don't be mad. And I got news for you. People that you think are going to donate, don't. And then people that you would never have thought in a million years would, do.
I've seen that.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of times when I've just thought I knew somebody really well, and then I didn't actually know them that well, But you can start small, and then now she participates in their different events. She goes and she volunteers at those events and helps, whether it's carrying water or putting out chairs or pulling down barriers or whatever. I mean, and she, this is what she told me. Her actual words to me were, "You were right. It gives you more than you give." I said, and yeah, it's 100%. You walk away feeling great, and you feel almost guilty for feeling so good about it, but it's true.
Right.
And I just think if people just dip a little toe in the water, just try something, a little bit, and, you'll find that you'll meet people that you probably would have never met otherwise. And then you're going to find out that they are the biggest hearted, most compassionate people. And they're the kind of people you want to surround yourself with.
Going from August 2012 to 2020.
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah.
Depends on how you look at it. It's 8 short years or 8 long years compared to the original.
I would never feel bad about the time that we got. Would I have liked more? Definitely. But I feel blessed that we got the time that we got.
But you've done a lot.
We did so much during that time. I mean, it was a kind of just the attitude of, let's just do it. Let's try it. Let's go. Because just, like I said, you never know when it's not going to be here anymore. And that applies to somebody who doesn't have, life-threatening disease. You still don't know how much time you have. And that's what I always tell people is, it's like, always make sure the last thing that you say to somebody is something that you want them to remember. Mm-hmm. Don't walk away on an angry note. Don't hang up the phone and be pissed. Always have the last thing that you say be something that you want them, or you want to remember that was the last thing you said. And yeah, we had a beautiful life.
In many ways, it's almost like he had a second life. He had 2 lives.
Exactly. I will tell you that's 100% true, and that's for me too.
Yeah.
I am a different person now than I was, before his diagnosis.
Do you have any advice for anybody, say, in a similar situation? If they find themselves, whether it's from health or a mindset or a life scenario where they just need to get out of it, or it's not optimal.
Well, I mean, I can go back to Bernard being on the couch in the same position as I left him in that morning, where he was, I could tell he was suffering from depression. It was like, my life's never going to be the same. My words of wisdom to him were, yeah, your life isn't going to be the same. It's going to be different, but maybe it's going to be better. Part of his going out and walking with a 90-year-old lady, those are their baby steps. So sometimes you need to take baby steps to make changes. Sometimes, like if you're really, really depressed, and trust me, I've had some really, really depressed points since he died. Sometimes it's like you go, God, I need to do the laundry, and then I got to fold it and put it away. Okay, you know what? Just do the laundry, and then later on maybe throw it in the dryer. Then sooner or later you'll fold it. It's like, don't put like huge expectations on yourself, because then you stop yourself from moving forward. So maybe it's baby steps, little tiny things that you work yourself through to move up to bigger steps. And I would say, try to surround yourself with as many loving people as you can. Don't allow the negativity in. Don't try to make other people feel better about something. You just worry about making yourself feel better about something, and you worry about the other people later. Because there's always going to be negative people. There are always going to be people that are like, think that you're maybe not doing the right thing. Only you know what the right thing is for you. And like I said, a lot of times it is, like I told my friend Kathleen, it's like, just volunteer, just do a little bit of fundraising. You can fundraise $250, I'll give you the $250. But, like that, those little baby steps have helped her walk outside of what she described as a smaller life. And now she feels like her life is bigger because she's opened it up to new things. Allow yourself to make a change.
That's that ripple effect.
Yeah. And sometimes, like I said, it can start from something really tiny. Just like doing the laundry.
Yeah. Yeah. So the message is do your laundry.
Well, it's like, remember there was a really good clip a few years back that I think he was a general in, I think the Navy, I can't remember, or maybe the Air Force. Anyways, he gave a commencement speech.
Admiral McRaven,
And
make your bed.
Make your bed. And I swear to you, that has stayed with me ever since. Because if I have a day, where I'm maybe didn't sleep and I wake up feeling, not so hot, and you want to just kind of get out of bed and walk away, I always turn around and look at the bed and go, no, make your bed. And I do. And then that is just a feeling of accomplishment that kind of sets me off to move forward again.
Well, yeah, I just think back to Bernard, and my memories of him are everlasting and still strong. Just thinking about his positive attitude, his sense of humor.
Oh my God, I know.
When he grew back his hair after he lost it.
And he was Fabio, Filipino Fabio.
We did that slow motion Pantene commercial, and with him waving his hair around at the gym, and even his vulnerability too.
He was funny because I can remember. So he always would continue to try to work out, even in the hospital.
Oh yeah.
And we had taken our TRX to Zion, and he had it set up in the room.
I remember that.
And all the Filipino nurses would come into his room, and they'd be like, "Show us how to work out, Bernard. Show us how." I'm like, "You have a fan club," and he's like, "Yeah, but it's okay. I need a fan club." And then, like at City of Hope, he'd have him bring a bike in, and he would bike in the room. And then also at City of Hope, every lap around the transplant floor. So if you did 8 laps around the transplant floor, that was a mile, and they'd give you a little shoe token.
I remember that.
And when I added up all of his shoe tokens, he walked over 2 full marathons inside of a hospital while undergoing treatment.
Yep.
And that's why I always tell people, it's like, you know what? If he could do it, anybody can do it. Anybody could do it. I can guarantee you there were days when he did not think he could make 1 lap. Mm-hmm. Those little rewards, I used to call them, they were like breadcrumbs for him. He was just, because he was a competitor, he always wanted another foot.
Yeah.
And we would hang him on a chain on his IV pole. And then he'd look up at it and he'd be like, "Oh, we need to go do some more laps." I'm like, "Okay, let's go."
I could hear him say that.
And the same thing, the nurses and the doctors just fell in love with him.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that they're going to give good treatment to anybody, honestly. But I believe that because he was so open and honest and funny and kind, that they gravitated towards him. I mean, his bone marrow doctor, he didn't have to continue to see Bernard because he technically wasn't his patient anymore once he was done with his bone marrow transplant. But he guided our whole medical journey from afar. I mean, every decision that was made, it had to be run by Dr. Farrell.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where you make connections with people and you find somebody that has compassion, that sees you as a person, and that you're worthy and that, you deserve help. That you want to surround yourself with those kind of people.
I think that's something that you see, that compassion will attract more compassion from others. Mm-hmm. It's by taking that act and committing yourself to performing an act of compassion. Other people see it and want to help and want to jump on, and in turns it just builds like a snowball in a good way.
Yes, it does. And I just think that a lot of times people are so wrapped up in themselves that they don't look outside themselves. Right. I mean, you just have to look outside yourself to see where the needs are. Yeah. Because they're around us everywhere.
Do you have any final words or final piece of advice for anybody listening?
When you think something's over, like that your life is over, like your person dies, don't allow yourself to stop there. Just know that maybe you won't repeat that kind of relationship, but there's other things that will come to you that are good if you allow yourself.
Never give up.
Never give up. That's actually the shoe token that we did for our 50K. I mean, our b.strong 5K. The last token that we did, that's what it says. Never, never give up. Because that's what he used to say. His favorite speech was Stuart, what was his last name? He was a newscaster and a sportscaster.
Stuart Scott.
Yes, that was his favorite speech that Stuart Scott gave at the ESPYs. And that was part of what he said, was never, never give up.
That's right.
Your journey's never over.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe Bernard's journey is still continuing.
I've used that quote way too many times about It's something along the lines of cancer doesn't beat you. It's how you live your life.
Yeah. Cancer doesn't define you. You're defined by the life that you live.
So I think at this point, it's good to stop and just say thanks for coming on. Thanks for showing us your vulnerability. Thanks for telling the story about Bernard. Thanks for reminding me about so many things that I forgot, and also reminding me of what it's like to not give up and to really keep a positive mindset and to keep pushing that compassion, even when you don't want to.
Yeah, but it also involves compassion for yourself. And I think that that's something a lot of people forget, especially if you're a real driven person. Like people that are really goal-oriented and really driven, if they somehow like maybe fail to make that little next deadline or something that they set for themselves, they don't give themselves a pass on it. They don't feel compassion for themselves. It's like you're not always going to be totally successful at everything. There are going to be times when maybe things don't go exactly the way you wanted to. But you have to give yourself the compassion and the love to know that, hey, try again type of thing. Never give up.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Thanks. This was fun.
Okay.
Listening to Dee's story, it's clear that compassion isn't just a fleeting act. It's something that stays with you and shapes who you are. And as we mentioned earlier, it's not about grand gestures. Often, it's the small acts of kindness that leave the deepest impact. Just like dropping a pebble into a lake, the ripple effect of compassion spreads outward, reaching far beyond the initial movement. Over time, those ripples can grow, touching more and more lives and amplifying in ways that we may never fully realize. I hope this episode has inspired you to think about the ways that you can help others, not just for their benefit, but for your own as well. Compassion, service, these are things that can help bring us closer together as humans, and they can make us better parents, better friends, better people. To my kids, I hope that one day you hear this and understand why I do what I do. The greatest gift we have to give in this world is the way that we treat others. While at times it's easy to do nothing, or you see others sit idly by, that is not the way. Be the change you want to see in this world. Take action. Do good. Do what's right. Whether you are alone or with others, character is defined as how you act when nobody is watching. Do what's right, always. Help where you can, and do it with care and compassion. Make people feel your intentions. Lift them up. That's the legacy I want to leave behind, and I hope it's one that you will carry forward. To everybody, thank you for listening to today's episode. I want to extend a huge thank you to Dee for sharing her story and for reminding us why compassion matters. To Bernard, I miss you. I know you're proud of Dee and you're watching over her, and I love you, brother. If you found value in today's episode, I encourage you to share it with someone who could use a little inspiration. Please like, subscribe, and follow. And as always, I'm here to remind you, you are not alone on this journey. We're all in this together. Until next time, take care, be kind, and keep finding ways to help those around you.